If you ever take a stroll down the streets of Montreal, you might be surprised by the lack of, well, French. Depending on where you are in the city, you might have a better chance of ordering in English or even in Arabic. So this begs the question, is Montreal still a French-speaking city? Let's begin by looking at this map. This is the linguistic majorities of the areas on the island of Montreal. The blue are majority French areas, the red is majority Anglophone areas, and the green is majority Allophone areas. And the darker the shade, the higher is the proportion of the majority. Now, Allophone simply means that the first language of the individual is neither English or French. So this can essentially be any language in the world. Just by looking at this map, we can conclude that there is an evident divide on the island between the northern part, which is heavily Francophone, and the southern part, which is heavily Anglophone. We can also get the sense that Montreal is actually a very diverse city with large areas having neither French or English majorities. In fact, if we look at this graph, we can get a better look at the percentages of each language in the city proper over time. We can see that French and English have actually lost ground in Montreal, while the Allophone category has increased significantly, especially in recent years. However, we can see that French is still the most spoken language on the island at around 49%. However, it is no longer the majority language in Montreal proper. Now, all these figures were for Montreal, the city proper, which is confined to the island of Montreal. However, to get a better context of French in the area, we also have to consider Greater Montreal, or the metro area of the city. Now, this encompasses all the communities around Montreal, including the island of Laval, the northern shore, and the southern shore of the St. Lawrence, and of course also includes the island of Montreal itself. By looking at this map, we can immediately see a big difference. Montreal surrounding communities are much more French proportionally compared to the island itself. And if we look at another graph, and this time including Greater Montreal, we can see a huge surge in the Francophone population and jumps to 63%. The Anglophone population stays relatively the same, and the Allophone category diminishes considerably, going from 34% to 22%. We can then conclude that with Montreal surrounding areas, French remains a very prevalent language in the Montreal metro area. Now that we have a better understanding of the language dynamics in the city of Montreal, we also have to look in the context of the province of Quebec and how does Montreal compare with other metro areas within the province. We can see with this graph that Montreal is significantly less French than other cities within the province of Quebec. In fact, Greater Montreal is 30% less Francophone than Quebec City, the second largest city in the province and also the capital. This means that Montreal is actually an exception within Quebec and hosts most of the non-French speaking population within the province. However, we can also see a similar trend with the city of Gatineau, just across the river from Ottawa. Gatineau, proportionally, has the second lowest native French-speaking population in Quebec when considering Greater Montreal as one entity. And this reality is mostly due to proximity with Ontario. Let's also remember that Montreal is only about 34 kilometers away from the Ontario border. And if we look at this map, we can see that Gatineau, Montreal, and Ottawa all find themselves in a transition zone between the two national languages of Canada. This transition region follows the Ottawa River and then transects the Quebec-Ontario border. This is a region that is heavily bilingual and influences of both languages are evident in each province. However, we can notice that the zone is largest within Quebec territory, a reality based on historical and current dominance of English within Canada. Therefore, Montreal has a significant geographical influence which has and still plays a role in a language choice within the city. However, there are other factors that have made Montreal such a unique place in terms of language. First, let's consider the historical factor. For most of Canada's young history, Montreal was actually the largest city within Canada. In fact, by looking at this chart showing the populations of Montreal and Toronto, city proper, we can see that Toronto only surpassed Montreal in 1998 after Toronto had an agglomeration with its surrounding communities. This means that Montreal, especially in the first half of the 20th century, was the major hub for all economic activity within Canada, such as finance, commerce, and manufacturing. And this economic activity almost entirely happened in English. At this point in time, Montreal was essentially operating as an Anglophone city, and English was the language of choice for most of the elite and business owners within the city. Evidently, with the rise of Quebecois nationalism in the 1960s, many businesses and industries moved to the more accommodating Toronto, changing the dynamics of language back in favor of French. In more contemporary times, Montreal is characterized by the rise of the allophone population. This rise is due to international immigration, and this immigration is quite different from other cities within Canada, favoring former French colonies such as the Maghreb region in Northern Africa, West Africa, Central Africa, and even Haiti. Most immigrants coming to Montreal have the capacity to speak French, however very rarely is it their mother tongue, and often speak other languages at home such as Arabic, Creole, and various West African tongues. There also exists significant Portuguese, Latin American, Italian, and Chinese communities in Montreal. So, to conclude, is Montreal a French-speaking city? Well, if we take the number of native French speakers in Greater Montreal, we can see that Montreal is actually still the 4th city in the world with the most French speakers, and would be the 2nd largest city if it were in France. We also have to consider that Montreal's government and institutions function entirely in French, and even the signage on the roads are entirely printed in French. Yes, French is technically declining in Montreal, however, Montreal has always been a multi-ethnic, multi-language city. This trend is just simply continuing. That is it for today's video. I hope that you learned something new on Montreal's unique dynamics in terms of language. If you've enjoyed the video, please consider liking and even subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Ciao guys.